All right. Now, manipulating objects in Blender, it's really an art form and takes many, many, many years of hard training. Okay, I'm kidding. It's a bunch of shortcut keys, actually. Thankfully, shortcut keys are your friend in Blender, and they will make life much, much easier. So let's see how to manipulate objects in Blender. First of all, to select an object you just left, click it, and it will select it. And you could see that because it then has an orange contour around it. Now, to move an object, we could hit the key, and that will allow for us to grab the object. So G is short key for grab brilliance, isn't it? All right. Now, if we want to not confirm the movement, we could right-click, and it will snap it back to how it was before and get rid of the grab manipulation. But if we had G and then left-click, it will confirm the movement of the cube. And so then we can move the cube around. Arsness Suite. So that's how we move our cube. Now, another way to move the cube is with the manipulators. If we go over here, we could hit the T key to bring up this tool shelf, and let's go ahead and expand it by getting the double arrows and clicking on the left and dragging. You could see that right now we have a select box, and that's the function that we have right now. We're able to select things, and then we have a cursor now. The 3D cursor right here We'll get more into that later on as we go through the course. But it's basically a shooting cursor, kind of like on a sniper rifle. And this allows for you to add objects to that cursor location or do specific things centered around this cursor right here. And then look at that. The next one we have is the move option. And by selecting this right here, we could then select our cube, and we now have a move manipulator. And look at this. We can move it through the axes, the z-axis, the x-axis, and the y-axis right here. And then we could also move it on right here. These little indicators basically say that it's going to move on all the axes, except for the x-axis. So this moves it along all of them, except the x-axis. This moves it on all of them except the z-axis and all of them except the y-axis like that. Now again, I pretty much never use this sometimes, but I like the shortcut keys because it's much easier. We could achieve the same results by hitting G. And then once you hit G to grab hitting Z to move along the Z-axis X, to move along the X-axis, and Y to move along the Y-axis. How cool is that? Really cool. And then to achieve all the axes except X-axis, we could hit G-Shift-X to move it on all the axes except the X-axis shift. Y move it on all of them except the Y, and you guessed it, Shift-Z to move it on all of them except the Z-axis. Sweet. All right. Now let's take a look at the next function, and that is how to rotate. I'm going to go ahead, and our second option right here is rotate. And again, we get some gizmos and rotation handles right here, which if we left click and drag, we could now rotate our cube. Now if I left click, it will confirm it. And we could easily undo this by hitting Control Z, the good old Control Z shortcut, which is basically the undo shortcut. Now, instead of using this widget, we could hit R to rotate, and this will rotate in the perspective you're in. Or after hitting R, hit the X key, Y key, or Z key to rotate it in that direction. Now, the cool thing is that we could actually, if you hit, for example, Z, you could see at the top left right here, it's telling you by how much you are rotating it. So right now it's rotated by 26 degrees. We can actually input any number that we want. So we could hit 45 on our keyboard, and it will rotate it 45 degrees. Pretty cool. Same thing with moving. If we hit G to move, we could hit Y to move it on the Y-axis, and then hit 1, and it will move it. One Blender unit. We could see if we hit 7 to go into top of view G. X, let's move on the X-axis 1, and you could see it will move it one Blender unit to the right. And again, the Blender units are these squares right here. So that is how you grab G-rotate, as are another cool thing with rotation. If you hit R twice, it will do a tumble rotation. Very useful. I use this one a lot. All right, you guys guessed it. You guys are good. The next one's scaling. Scaling allows for us to scale or increase the size of our object. Once again, we have the handles here to scale it. Or we can hit X, Y, and Z, or Shift Y, Shift X, and Shift Z to either use those axes or exclude certain axes. And once again, right. Click to undo or to not confirm it, or if you want to scale it left, click to confirm it. And again, you could hit XY3 on your keyboard to scale it in precise increments. And if you don't, if you just SAY, you could see on the top left up here, it will tell you by how much you're scaling it right now. We scaled it negative 4.0 something, something, something. And that is how you never manipulate your objects in Blender. All right, let's go back to our trusty select box, and let's take a look at a couple more things that we need to know as far as manipulating objects. If we hit the and kill, this is another way that we can manipulate our objects. You can see right here we have the transform properties of our objects. We have the X, Y, and Z location, and it shows that we've moved it. If we left click and drag on here, we could actually move it this way, or just input a precise amount right here. How cool is that? We could actually put in whatever amount we want if we want to move it up on the Z-axis too. We could put in a 2 right there, and you can see it's in meters. Same thing with the rotation. We could rotate it or reset the rotation with 0. And that right here, of course, we have the scaling of it from the scaling. All right, let's say that we rotated, scaled it, and moved it, and we want to undo that or reset it. Well, we could hit Control-Z a couple of times, which will undo our manipulations. However, maybe we round out. We ran out of control, no. So what do? We could hit Alter to clear the rotation, Alt-G to clear the location, and Alter-S to clear the scaling of it. So now it resets it to the original scale, rotation, and location. Now another thing, you could actually apply these transforms. So if we, let's say we scale it up, move it to here, and rotate it some arbitrary way, you could see that all these values are not 1, or they're not set to the default. They've changed the values. We could then hit Control-A, and we could apply the location and watch what happens to the location. Numbers on the right, the locations go to 0, because now this is the default location of the cube. We could control and apply the rotation. The rotation goes to 0, because this is now the default rotation of the cube and control. Apply the scale, and it goes to 1. Of course, it doesn't go to 0, because if it goes to 0, there is no cube, because there is no dimension to it. And now, if we all are algae or as, and you could see that doesn't change, because these are now the default rotation, location, and scaling of the cube. Pretty sweet, isn't it? All right. So that is it for how to manipulate objects. Go ahead and practice with your little trusty cube object here by rotating with Aki-G to grab as to scale, and then hitting X, Y, or Z to rotate, grab, or scale on those particular axes. Whoa, I don't even know what shape that is, but it's pretty awesome. And it's in 3D. All right, I'll see you the next one. Ciao for now. Over.